Hi, I'm Liz Wood with the Quilted Cowgirl, and today we're kind of playing around with some YouTube video prospects. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about a summer flip-flop quilt that I'm making. The pattern is called Summer Flip-Flops. It's out of the Fawns and Porter's Quilting Magazine. I'm sure you can probably do a search on their website and find the download for this pattern, but this pattern is just out of the magazine. And so here's the materials that you need to make this quilt. And so I'm going to show you a few of the fabrics that I have personally chosen to be in this quilt. These are all fabrics that I carry by Moda Fabrics. I chose the Mama's Cottage and the All Weather Friend line by April Rosenthal. So basically, I pulled some reds from these lines. This is the Mama's Cottage line, so I pulled some of the reds out of there, a yellow from that line, and then I pulled some of the reds and yellows from the All Weather Friend line. So you'll see some of these fabrics in my quilt, and these are all fabrics that I have for sale here in my shop. And today I'm making a log cabin block multiple times. I'm using it essentially for a border, or in the place of a border, and a flip-flop quilt that I'm making. So a log cabin is a very basic quilt block. It's very easy to make once you get your pieces cut. The pieces are simple to cut. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about how to make a simple log cabin block that I'm making for this quilt. So here I've taken 7 red fat quarters and 4 yellow fat quarters, and these are all fabrics designed by April Rosenthal for Moda Fabrics. Part of these are from the Mama's Cottage collection fabric line, and part of them are from her newest line, All Weathered Friend. So I have collected 7 different red fat quarters. So you see the 7 different ones. So these 2 here actually go into this little pile here, but I wanted you to see that there was other colors represented in these and not just these 5. So basically these are all cut 1.5 inches wide, and then they start with 1.5 inches square. So these are both 1.5 by 1.5, and then we go out to 1.5 by 2.5, 1.5 by 3.5, and 1.5 by 4.5, and 1.5 by 5.5. So those are all the pieces to make the log cabin block that I'm making. And so essentially, I have it laid out here in an order. You have to sew them together in a particular order to get your block to come out into a log cabin block. So essentially, we want this block to look like this finished block when we're done. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So I'm basically going to sew through some block steps here to kind of show you how it's created, and kind of the process that I go through to sew multiple blocks at one time so that it goes quicker and faster. So we're going to take these 2 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch blocks, and we're just going to sew those together. So that's going to start the center of our log cabin. So I'm going to line up on my 1/4 edge seam allowance, which is this little mark right here on my machine. So I know that I want the edge of my fabric to go right along that edge. And so you may be wondering what this little blue strips of fabric is that I have. Basically, these are little fabric scraps that I like to use as little leaders so I don't have to stop and start my machine. So I'm going to just sew those on in there between. I'm going to take and cut that off so that I can continue to show you how to make this block. So now I'm just going to press that little seam. I kind of finger press it a little bit, and I go over here to my wool mat. This is a wool pressing mat, It really makes a difference when you're pressing to get those seams to lay flat as opposed to just ironing on a regular ironing surface. So basically I just use a little bit of steam, press that flat. Now I'm ready to add the next block, which is my 2.5 by 1.5. So I'm going to make it go to the left, and so I'm just going to line up those pieces just like that and sew it through. That little piece just helps get my block on through the machine so I can cut it away. So now I'm going to press that seam open. I kind of do a little finger press, then just with my iron. Now I'm ready to add the next 2.5, which is going to be the red. So we're going to alternate yellow and red, and they're both cut the same size. So that's the same size as that. But now we're going to make it come down here and go. We're going to start going around this block to create the log cabin. So we're going to line up those edges, run it through. Come back, do a quick little finger press, press that open, put a little iron on it. And one thing that helps keep me going is I know that this red block here in the center is the center of my block. So I always want the red and yellow looking at me just like that. So now I'm ready to come to this side of my block, and I'm going to add the 3.5 inch strip on. So I run those through. Come back, do a little finger press, add a little iron to it. And this wool pressing mat really makes those lay flat. So now we went to this side. Now we're going to come up here on top with the yellow. We're going to be alternating the red and the yellow pieces. So I'm going to line those edges up, run them through there. Come back, finger press. So now I still got that block in the center looking at me, so now I'm ready to go over here to this side. We're going to go with the 2 yellows back to back because we need a yellow on this side to finish out that yellow side. So run those through there. Come back and finger press it open, put the iron on it. Now we want to come over here to this side and complete this side of the log cabin with the 4.5. Gonna line those up. Come back, do a little press. Now we got that as our center there, so now we're ready to add the 5.5 inch piece across the bottom. And this red is the only one that's 5.5. We don't have a yellow piece that's 5.5. This one red piece completes this block, so I'm going to line up those. And those pieces don't have to line up. You see a little bitty tiny bit of fabric sticking up there. That's okay. That's all going to quilt in. So the main thing is making sure everything's nice and straight, staying on the 1/4 inch seam allowance. We want the back side of the block to look as pretty as the front side of the block. Well, almost. So now once we press this piece open, there's our log cabin block. Just as simple as that. I like to, once I get it pressed, I like to flip it over, show you the neatness of the back side. Press it a little bit. Now I'm going to put a little best press starch on it to make it pristine. Press it out, and then it'll be all ready to go and square up before I actually piece it into the border that I'm using it in. But that's essentially the log cabin block. Made the simple, quick, easy way. So there's the finished product. Now I'm ready to take that to my cutting mat and square up all those edges and make it all nice and square. But that gives me a little bit of room that I can cut those little pieces off and make them look perfectly straight. So when I'm making this log cabin block, I don't like to just make one block at a time like that. I like to actually have several blocks going at one time. So you'll actually see my chain here of multiple blocks in different phases where I'm just going around that block. So basically I've started with the center, added these two other pieces. Now I'm adding the 3.5 inch piece onto this block. And notice I'm not pinning these. These don't have to be pinned. That takes a lot of extra time, and they don't have to be absolutely perfect. No, nothing in quilting is absolutely perfect. So now I'm going to come back to this one that's already on my chain. I'm going to finger press this one open. It's nearly complete. As you can tell, these blocks are all in various stages because I sit here and make numerous blocks at one time. So I'm ready to add this last piece onto this one. If you get them all cut, your pieces all cut and laid out like I have them here, and you sit down and you start sewing, and I use these little leader sew-in pieces so I don't have to cut and stop and start my thread every single time. I just sew over the top of those. I waste a whole lot less thread doing it like that than I do stopping and starting and cutting my thread every time. So basically I just sit here and sew these blocks just basically in the square, going around them in different phases, and so each one, it's a continuous chain. So now I know I'm ready for this one. So I just sit here and feed them into my machine one at a time, and then I have multiple blocks finished in just a matter of minutes versus just sitting here sewing one single block at a time. That way I know I can get lots of blocks done and just be more productive in just a few minutes. So that's just the way I prefer to do it. You don't have to do it this way. You can sit here and sew one block at a time, sew each piece onto a block and finish out one block and then go to another one. This is just what I find works easiest and the fastest for me, is just keeping an assembly line going, and then I get all my blocks cut and get them all in a pile, and then I take them in there to the cutting mat and square them all up at once, and then I'm ready to lay them out into my quilt. So basically there's my little blocks, chains in various forms, and I just cut those apart and just keep sewing and keep a chain going, and that's all there is to the making the log cabin block. Okay, earlier I was showing you how to do the log cabin blocks for my flip-flop quilt, and so now we have the log cabin blocks completed, and I want to show you how they fit into the regular construction of the whole quilt. So coming in here, ultimately this is the pattern and how we want the flip-flop quilt to end up looking, and so I'm just going to run through real quick basically how I put this quilt together. I found this real cute sand fabric that has little footprints already in it, and I took and cut out my little flip-flops from various bright colored fabrics, and then cut out the little thong pieces as well. So I just wanted to save some time and not have to put Wonder Under or fusible web on the back of this and recut all that. So I just took these outside and sprayed them with 505 temporary fabric adhesive. Just sprayed a little bit of that on the back of each of these pieces and just laid them down on here. And because I'm going to go sew them real quickly, so that just helped me save some time. So basically I just lay my little flip-flops out like that with the adhesive on the back. That secures them down to that fabric. Spray a little adhesive, put these on there, get them lined up where you want them, just like that. And that makes your little flip-flop block. So now these are ready to go to the machine, and you want to machine applique around these and stitch them down. So that's what I've done here in this quilt. Is I've used a blanket stitch, and I color coordinated my threads with a primary fabric in each piece, and so they're blanket stitched down. So basically the adhesive just holds the flip-flop in place on the sand fabric, and then I take it to the machine and applique them down. And then when I get all my blocks constructed with my flip-flops, I basically sew them all together in a row. So that's the flip-flop. The next piece is the sashing that goes in between the flip-flop rows. You have to have some fat quarters to make the log cabins and the sashing. So this is a fat quarter. It's an 18 by 22 inch piece of fabric. So you're going to have 7 reds, and then you're going to have 4 yellows. And so from these fat quarters, you're going to cut the pieces that you need for the log cabin blocks. Plus, you're also going to cut your sashing pieces. So to cut the sashing pieces, you take these strips and you cut them the length of your fat quarter, which is 22 inches by 1.5 inches. And so to create these sashing pieces, you basically lump them in sections of 4. So you take 3 reds and 1 yellow, and you will sew these together, these 4 strips together. You'll sew these 2 together, and then these 2 together, and then you'll sew the 2 sets together, and you'll create 1 strip set. And then you'll bring it back to your cutter, and you will essentially cut these in 3.5 inch segments. So once you've got that sewn together, you'll lay that on there, you'll cut it in 3.5 inch segments, and then it creates these little strip sets that are already sewn together for you. So basically you lay these out like this, sew them end to end like that, and go until the end of your row, and that creates your sashing by just sewing those little strip sets together. So that's your quick and easy sashing for that. And then okay, so we're going to take these log cabin blocks and we're going to lay these along the edge of our quilt to kind of show you how it completes the outside border with using these log cabin blocks that we've created. So basically we've used a yellow cornerstone log cabin. There's 4 of those that you make. They'll go in each corner. And then we'll lay these red and yellow log cabin blocks out around the quilt. So basically you just want to come in here and lay them, start laying them out, creating a pattern, and make sure that there's not any 2 fabrics that butt up next to each other. Sometimes it can't be helped, but that's why we lay them out ahead of time, is to get that pattern laid out. So essentially we've started laying the finishing touches on this quilt. We'll go in and square up these blocks, sew them together, sew them onto the flip-flop quilt, and then it'll be finished and ready to take to the quilter.